more answers than you know.
Each had multiple stab wounds. Some had defensive wounds, showing they fought with the attacker. And there was no sexual assault. County Coroner Kathy Mabbutt is describing the murders as personal.
So, here we go. So at last, Steve Goncalves reveals to the world several details about the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022, and that day and the following days, including some information about Jack Decor. And he also reveals to the world that Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk were, in fact, in communication, texting, while the attacks were going on at 1122 King Road and after. That is no surprise to this channel. If you have been watching this channel and the coverage of the Idaho case and what's going on with Bryan Kohberger, you will know that two of our student sources from the University of Idaho, who were good friends with Ethan Chapin, have informed the channel that it is known among the student community that the so-called, and I get this is not exculpatory evidence, but the so-called, what Bryan Kohberger's defense team is calling the exculpatory evidence that Bethany Funk has is just her experience. And well, the fact of the matter is it's not exculpatory at all. It is my opinion, and it is their opinion, that Ann Taylor doesn't have access to true exculpatory evidence. And at the time when Bryan Kohberger's defense team filed the motion for compelling Bethany Funk's testimony at a pre-trial hearing, the possibility of what Bethany Funk was going to say at trial was the big wild card out there that the defense team didn't really know too much about. So in order to neutralize that possible vicious wild card, Ann Taylor and her team needed to call Bethany Funk and her testimony to the carpet to find out what the heck was going on, what was her experience, and if they were not able to do that in some way, somehow, they really couldn't put forth an alibi for Bryan Kohberger, which we are all aware Brian Koberger's alibi came very late, and it was not an alibi at all. I was around driving late at night. I like to drive late at night. I was driving late at night that night, but not anywhere near 1122 King Road. No, boo-boo. It's kind of silly. So I want to point out that what Steve Goncalves told the world in this Airmail article, which I'm going to read a portion of in just a moment, is very much the same as what the two University of Idaho students shared with this channel. I have been talking to these two students since about 10 days after this tragedy occurred, and we have developed a bond and a trusting relationship. Some of you question that relationship in my judgment in hearing them out and deciding together what I'm going to talk about in this channel, which really is very little, but I have no question in that trust at all. And guys, I want you to know that I'm not pointing this out to say, told you so, this channel was right about this issue. It's not that at all. It's that I want facts to be shared with the world. I want the real story to be shared with the world. I want to talk about this true crime case with respect and dignity, and I want you, the viewers, to know that this channel and what is reported on this channel is something that you can trust and you can put stock in. Otherwise, I wouldn't be reporting on it. And if I'm speculating or we're speculating, I'm going to make it very clear that that is what is going on. So in the story that the two University of Idaho students told me that they know to be true about Bethany Funk's experience, they said that Bethany Funk saw out of her first floor window Brian Koberger walking. He was coming from the side of the house and then heading kind of diagonally across a house in front of where her window would be on that first floor across that parking lot area. So one of the important things about this testimony is that would indicate to me, to us, that he didn't park behind the 1122 King Road residence as most people first speculated. I think that this is corroborated by the weather conditions that evening and the likely slick roads, and Brian Koberger driving a Hyundai Elantra, allegedly not a very capable car in that weather. It would be very risky for him to park up behind the house when the only exit way is going to be very steep and likely slick. So why was Bethany Funk looking out the window? I thought that I had made it clear, but I've heard a lot of speculation talk amongst people on different channels about why Bethany Funk was awake. Bethany Funk was awake because I don't know exactly why she was awake. Was she just awake? And then she and Dylan started texting and then talking? Or did Dylan wake her up with her text and then talk? And that's why she was awake, looking out the window. I don't know how that happened. I've talked to the University of Idaho students about that. They're not very clear on that either, so I'm not going to act as though we are clear on that. But what I do know beyond a shadow of a doubt is that Bethany and Dylan were in communication for a while in those early morning hours, and I know what Bethany Funk reportedly saw out her window. And the person that she saw out her window was appearing the same as the person that Dylan Mortensen saw right outside of her bedroom door. Exculpatory to Brian Koberger? Hell no. Accurate? Yeah, guys, that is what happened. So let me first read you a portion of this article, this Airmail article regarding what Steve Goncalves said. So in the context of a much longer article that I think was very well written, goes on to say, even more troubling, if true, what Steve had learned from people who had spoken to members of the grand jury who had been presented with the prosecution's case. It centered on the alleged behavior of two roommates who had miraculously survived the night unscathed. How, he wondered, could they have slept blissfully unaware through the savage pre-dawn stabbing murders of 4 people in a narrow house with paper-thin walls? Later, a police affidavit revealed that one of the survivors, Dylan Mortensen, had in fact heard noises and left her room only to spot a masked, darkly clad intruder making his way through the residence before she retreated to her room and did not summon help for another 8 hours for reasons that have never been revealed. Yet Steve had been told the two survivors allegedly had only been awake while the killings had taken place, but they had heard nearly everything. I'm sorry, I inserted the word nearly there. They had heard everything. More astonishingly, his grand jury sources alleged that the two girls had been texting one another as the murderer methodically went from one room to the next. This is very consistent with the story that we reported here on this channel. The possibility that two people had a sense of the horror while it occurred and had not acted, calling neither friends nor 911, left Steve floored. And no less confounding, they had, if his sources were as knowledgeable as he believed, then let hour after hour after hour tick away before they finally decided to summon friends. It added an entirely new band of mystery to a crime that was already bound by unanswered questions. And so Steve intensified his efforts to get answers. And in that dogged process, he came to believe that the government must have a protected source, an informant who could provide testimony that would tighten the screws that held together the case against Kohberger. Steve was determined to talk to them. He did not want to wait for the trial to get the knowledge he needed for his peace of mind. He needed relief now. After some digging, he grew convinced he had the informant in his sights. He was preparing to reach out to this individual to get right in his face and confront him. He would explain that he was empowered by a father's natural right to understand fully the last moments of his daughter's life. Gosh. In fact, it was his duty. It was an argument he felt that no one could reject. Oh my gosh. And at last, he would know the whole story of what had really happened to Kaylee and why. But before he could make his move, before he could get in a room and have a heart-to-heart talk with a witness, he was unexpectedly stopped in his tracks by the FBI. The Bureau had sent an official letter to Steve's attorney in Moscow, Shannon Gray, warning that if there was any attempt to contact the individual Steve had been pursuing, there would be legal consequences. The witness had originally reached out to the authorities through a tip line that promised to protect the identities of anyone volunteering information, and the Bureau was duty-bound to honor that commitment. And the letter went on to make clear, with intimidating force, the fact that Steve was the father of one of the victims gave him no dispensation from the legal consequences that accompany tampering with a government witness. Damn. So that's what we have, my friends. And then I'm just going to play you a little bit from a video that I uploaded, a few weeks ago, that talks about the portion of the PCA that identifies 3 factors that allowed law enforcement to determine that the likely time of these horrific attacks was between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a comment below and let us know what you think. We all want to know what you think. Okay, everybody, so let's start to hone in on the exculpatory evidence that Bethany Funk is in possession of, according to our source-informed theory. Now, although the probable cause affidavit did not say much about Bethany Funk's testimony other than to say where she was that evening and that she was with Ethan and Xana from 9 p.m. to 1:45 a.m. at the Sigma Chi house, what Bethany Funk had to contribute to the investigation was critical because the investigators say that they honed in on the time frame, the 25-minute window of time during which the tragedies occurred due to these 3 factors. Number 1, Dylan Mortensen's statements to investigators. Number 2, forensic downloads of Dylan and Bethany's phones. And number 3, the video of the car in the area that appeared unusual. Considering we know a decent amount about Dylan Mortensen's statements to the investigators through the probable cause affidavit, and we know a decent amount about the surveillance video of the white Hyundai Elantra in the 1122 King Road area that appeared unusual, the only one of these 3 factors that we really know nothing about is the forensic download of Dylan and Bethany's phones. And we know that Dylan Mortensen was awake around the time that the tragedy occurred due to her statements in the probable cause affidavit and the timeline that's been provided by authorities. What we have not known is if Bethany Funk was awake around that time or not, and if she was active on her phone, if she was up and aware of what was going on, or if she was just in the house and she was asleep. Since only Dylan Mortensen's testimony appears in the probable cause affidavit regarding what she heard and saw around the time of the tragedy, it might lead one to believe that Bethany Funk was downstairs and sound asleep and she didn't hear or see anything at all. Now, if that were the case, then we would know that Brian Koberger's defense's assertions that Bethany Funk was in possession of exculpatory evidence would be absolutely bogus. It couldn't possibly be true. How could somebody have exculpatory evidence when they were sound asleep at the time that they were supposed to be gathering evidence? Even to say, as the defense team did, that Bethany Funk was a material witness that heard and saw things that were exclusive to her experience would make no sense if she was sound asleep. And since we know that attorneys need to file motions and make statements based on a good faith basis, that they can't just throw things out there to see if they stick, we have to assume that Brian Koberger's defense team did not truly believe that Bethany Funk was sound asleep at the time of the tragedy, yet they filed a motion out of nowhere that they knew would shock everybody, compelling her testimony in the pretrial hearing on the basis of the fact that she was a material witness who might be in possession of exculpatory evidence, right? Unless Ann Taylor wants to be putting her license to practice law on the line, that must be the case. So go ahead and answer this question for yourself. Are the reports that you're learning now about the truth of the experience of the surviving roommates, are they consistent with law enforcement's initial reports or the reports at all that have come out since this tragedy occurred?
In the eyes of the public here.
Hi, Emma Epperly from the Spokesman Review. I know you've said you're not going to release who the 911 caller was, but was the killer the 911 caller?
I will tell you no.
From the roommate's phone, but you didn't see the roommate make the call. So did the roommate make the call on the roommate's phone, or can you verify it was another individual who made the call?
Actually, if we could just go to this one first. And
Well, it's a phone, that's why I wanted to.
so what I'll say to that is it was made from the roommate's call, or phone, excuse me. And we're not going to divulge who made that call. It's part of our investigation still, and when we get ready to release that, we will.
Hi, Christina Corbin with Fox News. The male subject whom the women called, has he been ruled out as a suspect or person of interest?
Everything that we have taken from those calls, we have followed up on, we've cleared, and we believe that there's no connection there.
Gotti Schwartz, NBC News. Just following up on the 911 call, you said that you don't believe that's the killer. Can you conclusively rule out the person that called 911 from inside the home as a suspect in this case?
Can you go ahead and just ask that one more time, please?
The person that was inside the home that called 911, that was not one of the roommates. Can you conclusively rule that person out as a suspect at this point?
I don't think I said that it wasn't one of the roommates. I said that it was used with the roommate's phone.
I believe somebody asked if that was the killer. And you said
No, that's correct.
Was there someone there other than the 2 roommates when police responded?
So will you clarify that for me?
You're not confirming a roommate called 911, but used the roommate's phone. So was there someone else at the home other other than those two roommates?
There was other friends that had arrived at the location.
How many?
Everybody made the call.
Honestly, I'm not quite sure at this time, to be quite honest.
Do you guys have any idea if the killer's still within the community, or are you looking outside the community for the killer in terms of their physical location?
We are looking everywhere that evidence would lead us. I can't say if the person's here. I can't say what community the person's in. We're utilizing every resource we can to make that location of that individual. And part of that is the safety of our community is paramount. And that's why we brought in the resource that we brought in to keep our community as safe as we can.
Being so close to the border, does that make it kind of automatically an interstate investigation? Can you comment on that?
I cannot comment on that. I'm not even aware.
If you look in Washington at all, I guess, for
We're looking everywhere. I'm going to take 2 more questions.
Do you still believe this attack was done by one perpetrator? And if so, how does one individual kill 4 people at night and not wake up the other 2 roommates?
Our investigation will continue to look at all avenues of that investigation. I cannot disclose any of that information. I don't even know that information at this point in time, and that's why we're continuing to investigate.
You don't know how that happened without the other two roommates hearing it or waking up or?
We do not. One more question.
Hi, Angela Palermo, Idaho Statesman. In the press release yesterday, you confirmed that the victims were found on the 2nd and 3rd floors of the home. Can you say which of the victims were found where?
I'm not going to go ahead and disclose that information. They were found on the 2nd and 3rd floor. And that's as far as we're going to go with that part of the investigation too, because all those key pieces do come to play later. So we do thank you. We thank you for meeting with us. We thank you for helping get information out. And I can assure you, we will continue to work hard. We will continue to do everything we can to solve this. So thank you.
Finding the suspect.
Wait a second, Adam.
Let me show you the toxicology report. This person will strike again. In terms of technology, do you think that it's connected?
This channel looks forward to seeing that complete justice is served for the Idaho 4 and their families. May the Idaho 4, Madison, Kelly, Ethan, and Xana rest in peace.